theme. So our topic is self-awareness. Self-awareness. So awareness. That's what I was starting to talk about.
And this is going to sound super judgmental.
All right.
Okay.
Lay it out there.
So, I am constantly boggled by the lack of self-awareness. Not with myself, but other people. So it's completely judgmental. And then I have to back up and realize that, and I'm not saying this from a place of hubris, but realize that I have been on this journey and track for a long time. And, I do on a daily basis review conversations I've had with people, review, how I handled words I used, things I said that might
your
be hurtful or
your emotions.
I've made that part of my daily, I hate to say routine, but inventory.
Yeah.
And I remember back in my, early 20s, saying to somebody, oh, you know what, whatever I say to that person, it's like, that's their problem if they're going to interpret it that way. I have no responsibility, whatever, what comes out of my mouth. It's, I don't have any control over how they're
I'm glad I met you after that period.
Yeah. I was still kind, but I had much less self-awareness.
Right.
And much less, definitely much less awareness about how powerful words are and energy. And I have to, constantly also remind myself when I cross somebody's path that is not really kind, or I always think of it as not very self-aware, like they don't understand how their behavior is not only affecting our exchange immediately, but how that radiates out to how they're going to interact with somebody else, or how I'm going to interact with somebody else based on, the interaction I just had. And I often just try to let it drop.
Right.
And then think to myself, thank you for being a teacher to me about how I don't want to be in the world.
Right.
Because those people have to exist too in order for us to realize.
And you never know what they're going through or what minute you caught them in or what else is happening in their lives. And I think self-awareness and self-absorption are, maybe on a continuum. And I've been listening to Eckhart Tolle talk about his book, The New Earth, chapter by chapter. And a lot of that is about self-awareness. And it's also just about awareness. And I think, being aware of yourself and being an observer of yourself and your own actions and your own assessments, like, you say that you're doing, also like coming out of that constant assessing state that is the mind too, and sort of dropping into presence. So self-awareness is one thing, but just awareness is another. When you are just in a different flow. I mean, I feel like both you and I are fairly analytical people, and it's easy for us to sort of come out of awareness and maybe into a self-awareness, which we're observing ourselves, but we're also sort of keeping track and maybe being taken out of the present moment to figure out how we can make adjustments.
Right.
And that's a different thing.
Yeah, and I also think that this is... we have perceptions which are really, really strong, and we're our own filters in which we view the world, and often they're wrong. So we're making up stories based on we're making up stories based on we're reacting to somebody's behavior that has nothing to do with us, but we've tied it up in a neat little bow, and that's the story.
So
and
we can
in
put
reality,
a label
it's
on
not.
it. Yeah.
And in reality, it's completely wrong.
Yeah, it's
it's
not completely
not wrong, but
I think
our own narrative has been placed upon it. That's not
exactly. Yeah, and we've been challenged in looking at a lot of situations, and we can't help but look at things through our own lens and experiences. And I think the self-awareness part is knowing that we do have those built-in biases, that we do have our own story, our own cultural heritage that we're seeing the world through.
Right.
And how do you show up with a more open-mindedness, without already having an idea of what you think is right?
Well, and I think that's really, really difficult too. When you think about, remember that book, The Hidden Brain, and how he talks about how much information gets stored into our amygdala that we respond to, and we have no idea that's there.
Right, but we're reacting to all of it. Yeah.
Right, yeah. And I think the self-awareness is also coming to the realization that everything is not always about us.
Right.
There's
That's a big one.
This is my favorite.
Yeah.
And I think self-awareness and mindfulness are similar. And it is maybe understanding that the part of you that can be aware of yourself is maybe a truer essence of who you are. And when you're able to be self-aware, it means that you can stand back and view your emotions, view your responses, instead of just being your emotions.
And there's a really important component to that too, is what is your definition of self? Right? You have to have that before you can have awareness of it.
Right.
So what is that? I mean, we can make a judgment on that person doesn't have any self-awareness, but we don't know what their definition of self is.
Right.
I mean, so many, you think about so many layers of things have been, dumped on us over the years, based on interaction with our parents, our siblings, our peer group, our,
well, there's a
mentors.
There's a potency, as someone going through the world, people have made impacts on my life through things they've said, good and bad, things they've recommended, opportunities that have been provided to me. Like when you recognize what has impacted you, myself, and then you realize that you also have the power to impact every other person that you are coming into contact with in some way. I think that's part of the self-awareness too, to realize that we are all connected.
Right.
And so what you are getting and receiving from people and what you're giving out to people matters a lot.
And this is an important point that you make too, because but it can be used for good or evil, right?
It can be used for good or evil.
So you can be you can have self-awareness and realize, I can very easily control this subgroup of people and use them to my benefit. That's that's self-awareness.
Right, which is what I say all the time to the kids. Use your powers for good.
Right.
I mean, that's what we need, and know that you do have powers.
Right.
Like, we are all superheroes. We all have special gifts and powers, and what are you doing with those? And I think the self-awareness piece comes in, is recognizing that we have agency, we have potency, and then what are the choices that we're going to make on how we use that?
So we should call it selfless awareness.
Selfless awareness would be an interesting spin on that. That might catch on, Amy.
But you think because I think if you have self-awareness can sound very self-absorbed. And if you say selfless awareness, you're thinking of other people and how you're interacting with your, the children that you teach and the women that you reach out to in prisons and etc.
Well, I remember watching my sister run the Marine Corps Marathon, and it was a long day of walking to all the different locations and watching her run the 26. I'm like, I'm exhausted just watching. But you're there and people are clapping for the runners going by and going like, go 525 or and just the small handful of people that were applauding, you could see them run faster, their pace picked up.
Right.
They were elevated by our presence there. And I think, that made me understand in that self-aware kind of way, like what I could do to be of service, working with encouraging children or anyone else that's trying to learn something. Like just the motivation of saying something positive to someone is huge. And then the self-awareness is that I need those same kind of
and
strokes myself.
Right. And understanding that feedback loop, right? And saying, because I always say I don't really think there is truly somebody that is altruistic. Because altruism means you do something and expect nothing in return too.
But you're getting fed by that.
Right.
Act.
So if you're not,
it's not even a real thing.
I don't. Do you have an example of somebody from history or present day that is truly altruistic?
Well, I feel like there are probably people that knew they were not going to get known for their acts of service, that they might never be seen or recognized.
Right.
And those are probably really rare. But someone like Harriet Tubman, that, her vocation, her mission was to free as many people as possible. She wasn't, maybe she was doing it to make herself feel good, but she continually risked her life knowing that no amount of feel good is going to.
Well, and I don't think there's anything wrong with I wasn't saying it as a negative, like
right.
That's BS. There is nobody on the planet that's truly altruistic.
Granted, but I think some people do altruistic things because they want to be recognized for them. And when people don't have that, when it's an anonymous donor or when there's not going to be recognition, no one's going to see this.
Well, and it goes back to what truly you think when you do I don't know if you've ever done this, but I've done something for somebody and I'm like, am I doing it for them or am I doing it for myself? And what do I need recognition for this? No. I mean, the act of just doing it is I'm good with that. But
But I think understanding the real interconnection that exists between all of us, there is no real altruism, there is no real self-awareness without understanding that we are all connected.
Right.
So the events that happen to me impact other people, maybe not in the same way, but when you are reaching out to someone in a positive way and making a difference, it is going to impact you, and it's going to impact that person, their siblings, their whoever they come in contact with. I mean, it is that rippling out effect, and hopefully there is, if we are self-aware and we realize the interconnection that we have, and we can create something that's more positive and have that ripple out instead of something negative. Like, yay for me, yay for everybody. So we can all benefit.
Right. And then do we, how do we, you think about, I believe that we become what we surround ourselves with or by, right? Through osmosis, we become, you think about peer groups.
Right.
And you think about, so the person, say you're in a sort of a negative feedback loop in a group of people.
Right.
And you decide to step away from that.
Right.
Because you realize this is not what I want for myself.
Right.
This is, I need to step, and how difficult that is too for people to, come to the self-awareness to improve their situation or, where they are. Because I think so much of us is tied up in each other.
Right.
And
then also, what about the people that are willing to go into those difficult situations where there is a lot of dysfunction or need? And, as far as surrounding yourself around people, can you maintain enough of your own self-awareness to be in the face of maybe absorbing a lot of negativity, still be able to hold your ground.
And I think that probably is, you have to be really vigilant about that. Because you think about how people's energy affects you in a work situation, right? And no matter how strong you are and how vigilant you are, that seeps in.
Yeah, and it clings to us.
Yeah, and I think that having the self-awareness that can happen.
Well, yeah, and then seeking help. I mean, I've gone to see a healer who does energetic healing, and the first exercise she taught me was releasing. And as an empath, so I am feeling other people's feelings, I am putting myself in their situation, and, sometimes it's difficult stuff that comes up. So the first exercise was recognizing that those energies are coming into me. So having the awareness that I might not think that that's a problem, but to consciously release everything that is not serving my highest good. To consciously do that exercise. Like, I'm releasing everything that is not serving my highest good repeatedly throughout the day, because we are constantly absorbing.
Right.
So if you are going to, like, a lot of the, I'm working with a Head Start group. Some of the kids are nonverbal. They, some of them are joyous and off the charts. It's a wide spectrum, but it's a subsidized preschool, so sometimes they're coming from difficult or impoverished backgrounds. They're love nuggets. But I also, when I see wide eyes and fear and, the inability to speak, like, my heart breaks for them, and I want to be able to reach them. And then my own awareness is also now that I can't carry that concern with me throughout the rest of the day. I have to be present, give everything I can in a positive way, and then release all of that concern that I'm carrying, or it does impact me.
And I think that
later that afternoon,
creating environments where people can, that their feelings are validated, like something. Like, I was listening to a piece yesterday, I think it was on NPR, about and I don't know what you may know, Dave, but I don't know what they're auditors for Facebook, where they're actually just hours upon hours sort of just trolling images and posts and scrubbing them, basically.
Right, to see
so they're exposed to all this, and they give them like a 9, and they're dramatically underpaid compared to the average. I think the average salary at Facebook is like $120,000 a year, and these people are making like $28,000 to $30,000 a year to monitor the content
of all this negative stuff.
Yeah, so they're given, they said, like 9 minutes of self-care. Like they have to...
Not enough.
No. So, I mean, so there's a awareness that, there's... that this is... Yes. There's a modest awareness, that this is damaging to a person that's doing this several hours a day. And then... when they say 9 minutes is not enough for me to walk away from these images and sort of ground myself into having it not affect me long term.
Right.
So there's not a system that's supporting them taking care of themselves. They're basically being, sort of abused.
Right. Well, and that's the self-awareness piece, to recognize that as humans living in this period of time, that we are not really calibrated to absorb all of the information that's coming in.
Right.
And how do we take care of ourselves?
But I don't even think we're aware about how often we are assaulted by a lot of information that we really don't want in our minds, and it insidiously implants itself there.
Right.
And and then, the other, I think a big piece of self-awareness is extracting yourself from everything and getting quiet, taking a walk in the woods or what have you. And I think that, that type of self-care is, I think, greatly diminished over the last 100 years.
Yeah.
Or even less, 25 years. I mean, you think about how quickly technology's developed and how
the internet,
and how quickly we've, adapted to that as part of our way of life.
Right.
Which, but I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, this has made me think about, back to the self. What is my definition of self?
Right.
And where am I getting that?
Right.
Is that something that I've come to on my own, or I've read it in a book, or I've.
Well, I mean, I feel like it's it's you as you exist within your body.
Right.
That is yourself, and then there's other extensions. Like things that you've written or things that you've made, or
right.
There are extensions of yourself. But it's your brain living in this body with your spirit making it all alive.
Yeah.
And then what parts of yourself are speaking. And then what parts of ourselves have been sort of sent away and, that we do to ourselves, this isn't serving me anymore. This childishness has to go.
And that also, that I think deep self-awareness about, what our gauge of right and wrong is, or what's healthy and not healthy, requires a tremendous amount of courage. Right, to again step away from our pack,
right,
and realize that okay, I'm going to be fine with or without acceptance from whatever my peer group or what have you. I'm going to have to find another one, right? I'm going to have to find another, group of people that will. I don't know. I mean, I think because there is a feedback, right? Mechanism,
and it's where is it coming from? So it's coming from, this place of other human connection. Our family is our jobs, our peers, our friends, our associates. So I really feel like the self-awareness is when you disconnect from that enough to drop deeply into the quiet place that you're talking about when you go for a walk or when you're sitting to meditate, when you can really drop into what I think is the seed of what causes religions to start, the quiet spiritual center where you can listen to, not just all the, egoic voices and concepts that you've heard and picked up, but the deep quiet of your heart. That is your guide.
And you talked about a seed that's been planted, and I think of the seeds that were planted by a healthy ego structure provided by our parents. And then, where that trajectory goes. And does it,
Yes, but I do believe that every single human has that divine spark and seed that is within them, and it just does require extracting yourself from all of the noise and all of the stories and all of the layers and listening quietly. And I think, some of the people that have been put in solitary confinement, that have been told they're the worst criminals ever and they're so bad they have to be isolated even in jail, they have found that quiet place because they have no other choice. Or they go absolutely insane.
Crazy, right.
But some of them find that spot, and they may be people that didn't have the nurturing or the opportunities to have that propagated. So there they are, and they're in this situation where it's actually kind of the perfect time. You have nothing else to do but look within and find that deep sense of self.
And I think the sense of self, as you were talking about the being in solitary confinement, and you think, is it really a sense of self? I mean, is it mislabeled? Because the self comes from many parts of other things that have been imparted to us, or you say propagated by, other influences, right?
Right.
I mean, how do we parse that out? I mean, I think it's all our sense of self maybe is what works for us and what makes us feel at peace. Right. But it's not just self.
No.
It's an
amalgamation of a lot of other
exactly.
things.
That's a word I was going to use. Yeah.
Got to it first.
Yeah.
But
so that's it. To me, that sounds a little bit egotistical, right?
How so?
self-awareness,
How so?
like it's just me, myself, and I, and it excludes everybody else. It's
I don't know.
kinda
I think you
don't know.
can have that divine spark that is a unique expression and experience, like that's happening in this moment. You know,
Right,
like,
but
it's
it's a
sort of like a
collection.
one-time drop. But yeah, it is a collection of all the other things. But the essence of that when it drops in is, you know, this little sphere, and it's going to spin around, and it's going to collect experiences, and it's going to collect in other people and impressions, and it will be constantly bumping around, just like...
Well, it's like I have arrived at this, self-imposed awareness based on my interactions with everything with which I've come in contact, or with whom, or, you know,
Right,
experiences, people.
Yeah, and then maybe you're peeling parts of those away to see... I mean, they all give us an opportunity to feel, think, or respond, like all of those things. And it does make up, you know, who we are.
Right. I just think like that you say, I have self-awareness. Well, it's and I'm not being critical. I'm just being analytical and philosophical about it. It's not, you know, the definition of self-awareness isn't the same thing for everybody.
Right. Absolutely.
But so what is it, like, what is that? To me, self-awareness is a feeling, right? It's not, it's hard to decipher, describe, dissect. It's a feeling in your body, right? That you...
I think for me, it's more of like a state that I'm striving towards. You know, like self-awareness is, like, I don't know if we're ever really done with...
Right.
Like, I don't know if you get there.
Right.
I think it's just like moving towards that understanding of how to be in the world.
Or I mean, this is really simplistic, right? Self-awareness is, I affect you, you affect me.
Yeah.
And that is, so let's figure out how to negotiate this together.
Right. And bring something. I mean, I'm really optimistic about, you know, if that concept, I affect you and you affect me, and we affect our world and our community and our environment.
Makes us more accountable, right? Right. And a little more mindful about how we move through the world.
Yeah, I think self-awareness is accepting that interconnection is the reality.
And that I need you, you need me.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about where we are sort of as a country, or even as a world, because we're seeing it everywhere, but this hard fractionation.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this morning, about how there are people, and we've all experienced it in our lives, that were a part of it, that are now, you're at odds because you have, one person voted for somebody and the other person voted for somebody else. And you think, how can this be? I mean, we've known each other for a long time, and we've respected each other, and we've loved each other.
And now
this one person has divided us.
Right,
and it's not,
right.
I realize it's not that. It's ideology, but it just boggles my mind that this is destroyed.
But it overpowers all the other features that define the friendship.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
or
really
the relationship.
Right.
Yeah. How does that much power get put on one political affiliation or election outcome? Yeah. And then to be self-aware and to look at, why am I so triggered by this? Why am I so judgmental of them? Why can't I find the common ground? You know, to like take ownership yourself. Like, what is it in me that can't allow them to believe what they believe?
Right. Or back to the, you think of, the Krista Tippett's, the Conversations with Civility project. And going back to, instead of reacting, viscerally to something somebody says, it's like,
right.
That's interesting. Let's, why don't we dig a little bit more deeply about why you hold on so tightly to this ideology or this belief system, and let's understand each other a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And I think that you think of going back to self-awareness, is we want that for ourselves, and we want to be more mindful. We want to be more in touch. I guess self-awareness is really being in touch with yourself, good and bad.
Yeah, and seeing when those emotional responses come up that have us like clamp onto something and like need to be right.
Right.
And that's the part of self-awareness that is really practical, and where you can observe yourself going like, oh, I'm getting to that place where I can't even hear anyone anymore. I need to be heard.
Right.
More importantly.
Yeah. And I think that
2 minutes.
2 minutes. So, but I think that back to, I think, Dave, what you said early on about the real issue with our society is that there is a lack of self-awareness, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think that, we go through this process of, it's hard to define self-awareness, but this process of understanding ourselves, right? Maybe that's it. The process of understanding ourselves and how we relate to ourselves, and then how we relate to other people.
Right.
And then, completely truncating that to, I don't understand myself, so I don't have to understand you. And
I have no responsibility for my impact on the world.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And, that self-awareness can then maybe also grow into a cultural awareness or a national awareness where, as Americans, we use up our share of the world's resources by the time we're 2 years old. Mm-hmm. To have that kind of awareness that, collectively, this is the impact we're having, and making decisions based on a different understanding where, it's a self-awareness, and then it's, a societal, we need to see things and what our impact as a society is on the world, too.
And I think back to, I think a rigorous examination of ourselves and how we impact each other is painful.
Yeah.
And we've been brought up in a society that you don't have to feel pain. You don't have to feel pain.
Right.
And
have a beer.
You should be happy, or you should be, this is, you don't need that, and you do need it for growth. And I think that, really taking a good look at ourselves and kind of the wake we've left in our lives, whether it be positive or negative, can be painful.
It
right?
can, yeah.
And then leaving that and say, okay, well, I'm making a different wake now.
Right.
And
maybe I can atone a little bit.
Right.
I've learned something here.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the self-awareness.
Thank goodness we have so much awareness.
But I was going to say self-awareness also requires self-forgiveness.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So,
hand in hand. Mm-hmm. And then forgiveness of everyone else, too.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can have authentic forgiveness. Without
you have
actually
to forgive yourself.
You have to forgive yourself before you can
love.
authentically forgive somebody else.